Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf Pei Zayin is primarily discussing the halachos of special leniencies which Chazal made to allow people to draw water from a body of water on Shabbos. We've been discussing this for a daf or two. We will continue to discuss it. As we know, a body of water generally has the halachos of a carmelis, depending on its dimensions. If it's at least 4 tefachim wide and 10 tefachim deep, it's a carmelis. The place you're drawing water into is probably Rosh Hashanah. That would be an Issa D'Rabbanan, but Chazal allowed leniencies for water drawing purposes. So we have seen the opinion of Rav Yehuda. We're going to compare it to a statement of Rav Hanani ben Akavia. We're going to be discussing drawing water to a porch out of a well. We'll have a new halacha which is similar to the halachas of Lavud and Gad Achas and Gad Asik, where you can halachically view walls as being a different shape than they are. We'll have a new one called kaif, which means you can actually view a straight wall as being folded or bent. Then we'll have a Mishnah which takes us to the halachas of a stream running between two chatzeres, between two mavais, or between two houses, and how you can draw water from the stream, what type of situations do you have to have there. And then there'll be another Mishnah which the Gemara will discuss whether or not it fits with the kavi in the first place. So first of all, let's begin. We had the opinion of Rav Yehuda. We saw that if you have a wall of a chatzer, a regular courtyard wall, running over a well, that counts as a wall to divide the well into two separate rishuyos. Rabbanan had argued. Now the Gemara wants to say that Rav Yehuda has this special leniency. He goes even further than the classic leniency. He even allows a wall of a courtyard to count as a wall for water. Probably he holds like the opinion of Hanani ben Akavia, who also has a leniency as far as water drawing. What's his leniency? Hanani ben Akavia has a halacha called folding. If you have a wall which is flat, you can halachically view it as bent in order to create a situation where you have enough walls to allow water drawing. What's his case? So he says, if you have a porch which is made up of two beams which stick out of the upper floor of a structure, a building, and there's a board laid across the beams. That way you formed a porch. So it says Chananya ben Akavia, if the board is 4 amos by 4 amos, which comes out to 24 tfachim by 24 tfachim, and amma is 6 tfachim according to this. So you have 24 by 24. We said that in order to draw water, you need to have a hole 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, and you need to have walls 10 tfachim high. Says Akavia here, if you just have, says Chananya ben Akavia here, if you just have a hole in the middle, that's enough. Why? Because it's 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, and you have 10 tfachim left on all sides, since the original board is 24 tfachim by 24 tfachim. You got 4 in the middle, you leave 10 on each side. Now, even though it's flat, we can halachically view it as if it's bent upwards, and you now therefore have a 4 tefach by 4 tefach hole surrounded by walls, 10 tfachim by 10 tfachim. That's enough to draw. A special leniency called kaif. So Hanania says it, and Rav Yehuda probably agrees to it. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. Rav Yehuda has his leniency, Hanania has his. Not necessarily do they agree. Who says Rav Yehuda would say kaif? It's a different halacha altogether. And Hanania was only said as halacha possibly in the town of Tveria. We shall see that later. Tveria, the Yamshel Tveria, the Kinneret, had a rim that was high. So the water was really surrounded by walls. Now it's still a carmelis because it's still very big. It's like a karfev, but it is an additional leniency, and it could be only there did Chananya ben Akavia say his kula, but he would not necessarily say it anywhere else. Now, says Abaye, based on the principle of kaif that Chananya ben Akavia has created, that you can view the walls as if they're folded, you can actually have more situations in which you can count a flat board as being a complete system of 4x4 tefach hole and walls 10 tefachim high around it. And the Gemara now brings 3 examples, 2 from Abaye and 1 from Rav Huna ben Rav Yeshua. Abaye says as follows: let's say the board that's laid across the 2 beams to form the porch, let's say the board is spaced from the wall by 3 tefachim. So that means you have a hole there. You have a hole between the wall of the building and the board. That's a 3 tefach hole. You need 4 tefachim. So what you can do is you can hollow out a bit of the board so that you now have a 4 tefach hole. How much do you have to hollow out? You have to hollow out at least a length of 4 tefachim. Now you have a hole which is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Now the wall of the building counts as one wall. You've hollowed out 4 tefachim strip from the board. past the 4 tefachim strip, you need another 10 tefachim on each end in order to be able to halachically view as folded upwards to form the walls of the sides. So if you do that, you're going to end up having a total of 24 tefachim length. So the board has to be at least 24 tefachim long, which is 4 amas. Now, the fourth wall, you need to have 10 tefachim high. So you already had to hollow out a piece parallel to that fourth wall in order to make the whole 4 tefachim wide. And you have to have another 10 tefachim there. So that's good, because if you have 11 tefachim width of the board altogether, so then that's enough. You can hollow out the 1 tefach and still have 10 tefachim you can view as folded upwards. Now, interestingly, what comes out is that the side wall then is only 1 tefach wide, because what we folded up for the side walls was only 1 tefach, because the entire other 10 tefachim becomes folded up to be the end wall, which is opposite to the wall of the house. So you end up with a 1 tefach wall, but that's enough as long as it's within 3 tefachim of the wall. So the truth is that really the gap should either be slightly less than 3 tefachim, or the tefach should be slightly more. That way you'll close the gap. You won't have a full 3 tefach gap. You'll have a less than 3 tefach gap, and you'll be able to say lavud on the 2 side walls and close it up. Now, says Abaya another thing. If you have the board and you place it standing upwards, so then the board has to be 10 tefachim high and only 6 tefachim long. Why? Because the 10 tefach height you have, across from that you have the wall of the building, which is your other wall, and now you're going to view the 2 ends of the board as being folded towards the wall to form the 2 side walls. How much do you need to fold? 1 tefach, not more than that. You need a 4 tefach space. The board has to be spaced 4 tefachim from the wall of the building in order that the hole that's being formed is at least 4 tefachim. You just need to close the gap to within 3. So you need to have a tefach and a bit on each end that you can view as folded. How long is your board actually then? Your board actually then it comes out to be 6 tefachim and 2 bits, so that you can have 4 tefachim to form the outer wall along the hole, and you can fold, and you'll be able to halachically fold a tefach and a bit on each end, so that the side walls are within 3 tefachim of the wall of the building, making lavud, and everything is okay. Now, says Rav Huna Breda Vishua, if you have another situation, let's say the building that you have the porch on is actually a corner, so you have 2 walls of the building you could use, and the 2 beams stick out and form the porch there. So all you need is a little piece of wall in the corner that's 10 tefachim high, 2 tefachim wide, plus a bit on each end. What happens then? This can be placed in the corner. It's 10 tefachim high. It'll be placed in the corner which is not bordering any of the walls. It's 10 tefachim high, so it forms a wall. It's 1 tefach and a bit, which means it gets to within 3 tefachim of each wall. Therefore, it closes it off with lavud, and you end up having 4 walls, plus the 4 tefach hole at the bottom, and therefore you have 4 walls. So you have 4 walls halachically surrounding the 10 tefach hole. So the Gemara asks, all these cheshbonos are so good, how do you ever have a situation where you have Chananya ben Akavia's halacha, that you just need a board which is 24 tefachim by 24 tefachim? So the Gemara answers, that you have when there's no walls. You just have a board on legs of some sort. There's no walls around, or obviously if it's more than 3 tefachim away from the wall, so then that was where Akavia's halacha would come into play. Okay, now we start the Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses what happens when you have a stream running between 2 courtyards. So the stream itself is a convolus. The courtyards are Rosh Hashanah. People want to draw water through their windows from the stream itself. So says the Mishnah, you gotta close off the stream. You have to have walls on all 4 sides around the stream in order to make it into a symbolic Rosh Hashanah. Again, it's not going to be a full-fledged Rosh Hashanah because the walls don't extend it down to the bottom, but you got to put walls there, one at the entrance to the stream into the chutzner, one at the exit. And there's a machlokas, can you use the walls of the courtyard as walls of the stream? Rav Yehuda, again, as he said earlier, says yes, you can, and the Tana Kam says no, you can't, even though we have leniencies. For water, it's got to be walls made for the water, even though they don't reach the bottom, that's fine, but it's got to be made for the water. It can't be that it was made for land, made as a regular courtyard wall. That would not be enough. Now, Rabbi Yehuda tried to prove his position. He said there was an incident that happened in the city of Avel, that they were filling up water from a stream that passed through, and there was no additional walls created, and the Zakanim were okay with it. The elders were okay with it. So the Chacham said, no, that was different. Over there, they didn't need anything because that stream was not the minimum dimensions to be a carmelis. It was not 4 tvachim wide and 10 tvachim deep. Therefore, it's not a carmelis. It has the halachic status of the Rishus, which is near it, which is the Rishus HaYachid, and that's why that's okay. Okay, now the Gemara begins. It quotes 2 brises, which are similar to our Mishnah. The first brisa pretty much just fleshes out the Mishnah. The second one contains an ambiguous machlokes, which is unclear, and the Gemara will have 3 different pshatim in explaining what the machlokes is actually about, and then it'll be a lengthy discussion, which takes us to the next Mishnah. So the first brisa says as follows, that you have to make a wall at the beginning and at the end of the stream where it enters the chutzner and where it leaves it. If you do not make the wall, then you cannot draw from it on Shabbos. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you can count the chutzner wall as one of the walls. According to the Chachamim, you can't. Rabbi Yehuda said that there was an Amas Hamayim, there was a stream that went from Evel to Tzipayri, and people drew from it on Shabbos, and the Zakanim let them do that. And they answered him, that's not a proof, because over there it wasn't the minimum size of 10 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim wide. Okay, that's the same as our Mishnah. Now the brisa, the second one, comes as follows. If you have a stream of water passing between 2 houses, and there's windows, so you want to draw water from it. So there's a machlokes over here. According to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, you can only draw if it's less than 3. According to Chachamim, you can only draw if it's less than 4. The opposite. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says if it's less than 4, and the Chachamim say if it's less than 3. Where it says 4, 3, what are you talking about? So the Gemara has 3 explanations over here. First pshat, the Gemara says, is that the stream of water itself is 3 tvachim wide or 4 tvachim wide. And the machlokes then would come out to be, which one makes it a carmelis? If it's less than 3 tvachim, it's for sure not a carmelis. What if it's between 3 and 4? Is that a carmelis or not? That's the machlokes. If it's not a carmelis, you can draw from it. If it is a carmelis, then you can't. Says the Gemara, this can't be the pshat, because Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, quoted Rav Yochanan, who said that everybody knows that a carmelis is 4 tvachim. Less than 4 tvachim is not a carmelis. According to this, they would only be saying like the Chachamim, and they would be against Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. You do not want Rav Dimi to be saying things that only fit with one Tana and not the other. So the Gemara says, okay, different shot. When you say 3 and 4, we're not talking about the stream, we're talking about the banks of the stream, the space of sidewalk between the house and the stream itself. Why do I care what size that is? Because the stream is a carmelis. The bucket is kept in the house, which is a Rishus HaYachid. But the banks, if they're small enough, would be a Makam Patur, which means that what I could do is I could lower the bucket out the window from Rishus HaYachid, put it down on the sidewalk, which is a Makam Patur, didn't do anything wrong yet, then pick it up from that Makam Patur and put it in the carmelis, which is also not a problem because it's going from a Makam Patur to a carmelis, that's mutter. And then I go back the same way, and then I can draw from it as long as I stop on the bank, which is a Makam Patur, it's okay. The only question is, at what size is a bank considered a Makam Patur? And that's the machlokes. Does it have to be less than 3 tvachim or have to be less than 4 tvachim? So the Gemara says this also can't be, because we have a famous halacha which Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael. I quoted Rav Yochanan, says that you cannot stop off in a Makam Patur and then transfer from one rishus to another via stopping in a Makam Patur. That's forbidden. So he said that halacha about somebody who has a stoop and he wants to stop off, he wants to move something from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, stopping in the stoop, and vice versa. We said that you're not allowed to do that. That looks like carrying straight from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid, or vice versa. So how could you do it here? So the Gemara wants to explain that this is different because this is Rishuyas Derabanan. This is from Rishus HaYachid to a Carmelis, not Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaRabim. The Gemara says that that's not true either, because we know that Rav Yochanan says his halacha even in the case of Rishuyas Derabanan. Where do you see that? The case of a wall between 2 chatzeres. The wall is a makam tur, 2 chatzeres are a courtyard. The iser to go from the chatzer onto the top of the wall is a iser of not having an air of chatzeres. You're using a shared rishus. So that would be an iser derabanan of using a shared rishus. And over there, Rav Yochanan says that if the top of the wall is a makom patur, so you're allowed to eat things that are on the top of the wall. You're allowed to put something onto the wall. You're allowed to take it off the wall. It's considered to be the rishus of both chatzeros on either side, and both of them are allowed to use it. That's as opposed to Rav, who said that neither of them are allowed to use it because it's a shared rishus. Rav Yochanan said they're both allowed to use it. The implication of what Rav Yochanan says the Gemara, is that you're allowed to put something on the wall or off the wall, but you cannot transfer it to the other chatzer by having it stop in the wall. That's already forbidden, and that's the same halacha we're seeing here. So there, Rav Yochanan is saying it in Rosh Hashanah to another Rosh Hashanah. That's only in a Rabbanan. He said you can't stop off on the wall in order to do that. So here also, in this case, he also shouldn't allow you to do it. So when it says that halacha there was said by Ze'iri. Ze'iri is the one who said that. Rav Dimi doesn't agree. The Gemara says, so then how is Ze'iri going to understand our brisa over here? He can't use the pshat of the 3 and the 4. Machlokas Shimon ben Gamliel, the Chachamim can't be referring to the bank, because the Ze'iri said you can't drop off the bucket in the bank. It wouldn't be permitted, the bank of the stream, that is. So the Gemara says, okay, Ze'iri will go with the first pshat. He'll say that it's referring to the minimum size. And as far as whether that comes out, meaning that Rav Dimi's halacha is a one opinion in a machlokes Tanaim, Ze'iri will say, yes, it is, and you should take that up with Rav Dimi. It's his problem, not my problem. Therefore, Ze'iri will say that that's fine. Okay, now the Gemara wants to propose a third pshat in the 3 and the 4. The Gemara says that the third pshat is Ravina. And Ravina says what's actually happening is that you're setting up walls in the stream to close off the stream, but you're leaving a gap. And the question is, how much of a gap are you allowed to leave? And the answer, of course, is lavud. But the machlokes of Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim is how big is lavud. The Chachamim say lavud is 4 tvachim, and Shimon ben Gamliel says lavud is 3 tvachim. Less than each of those, just under each of those. So that's exactly what's happening over here. How much of a gap are you allowed to leave? That's what this machlokes is about, just like we've seen our machlokes elsewhere. Now the Gemara has some questions here. The Gemara says, why shouldn't the part of the stream that's closed off be considered like Chure Carmelis? We know that halacha is that the wall of Rosh Hashanah has the halacha of Rosh Hashanah to some extent. To keep things in the wall has the status of Rosh Hashanah itself. So even if you're closing off the stream, but you're closing off part of it, the rest of the stream is still a Carmelis. So the part that's closed off should still have the halacha of holes in the wall. It should be considered an extension of the Carmelis itself. So the Gemara offers two answers. One, first of all, maybe the halacha of holes doesn't apply to a Carmelis, only to a Rosh Hashanah. Second of all, this is too far upstream. It's far away. It's far away. It's not the holes of Rosh Hashanah, which is right near Rosh Hashanah. This is all the way upstream. Therefore, you wouldn't need to worry about it. You wouldn't have the halacha of holes when it's so distant from the Carmelis itself, even if you want to hold that Carmelis does have a halacha of holes. Okay, we're now beginning the next Mishnah, which is two famous halachas which we've been discussing for quite a while. First of all, the halacha of the porch, where you have a hole 4x4 tefachim with walls around the hole to help you draw water from the body of water which is beneath it. The Mishnah says that halacha, you're allowed to have the hole, the walls 10 tefachim high, either above the hole, on top of the porch, below the hole, hanging from it, and then you can draw water from beneath it. And it says that if you have two porches, one above the level of the other, Rashi points out, as we've seen earlier, that they can't be 4 tefachim, more than 4 tefachim apart horizontally. But if the upper one made a hole with walls and the lower one did not, but the lower one can go up to use the upper ones, but they didn't do an Erev Chatzeres, then it's forbidden for both of them to use it, because they both are considered to have equal access to it, and therefore you need to have an Erev Chatzeres. Without an Erev Chatzeres, it would be Aser. Okay, says the Gemara, this Mishnah doesn't fit with Akavia. Hanania ben Akavia. Hanania says that you're allowed to draw water even if you only have a flat board, because you view it as if it's folded up. This Mishnah doesn't say that. Gemara says not necessarily. Hanania ben Akavia only said as halacha in Tveria, where the Yamashal Tveria, the Kinneret, has a rim, which forms a high wall, and it's surrounded by cities and karfifos, and therefore it has walls around it, and even though it's still a Carmelis, it's a much more lenient Carmelis. Now, on the subject of Hanani ben Akavia, the Gemara quotes a brisa. Hanani ben Akavia was matir. He permitted 3 things for the people who live in Tveria. First of all, the board to draw the water, as we've been discussing. Second of all, he said that you're allowed to hide your fruits, you're allowed to store them in the leftover chaff from the bean plants, even when they're wet from dew, and it might not necessarily make the fruits that you're storing in them ready to be mekabel tamah. The halacha is that fruits do not become tameh unless they are first made wet by some of the liquids, by one of the 7 liquids that was put there with your not intent, but with your agreement, that you're happy that those liquids were applied there. Now, if you went out early in the morning to bring in the bean chaff so that you could store your fruits in it, and you went out specifically early in order that it should still be wet from dew, so you could have dew there, that means you're happy that it's wet, and therefore that is a liquid which can make the fruits that shall hide there wet, and it'll be mekabel tuma afterwards. However, if you went early in the morning just because you need to be able to get to work, and you don't care about the dew, so then you're not necessarily happy about the dew there, and it would not be machshir, make your fruits ready to be mekabel tuma. On that, Chanani ben Akavia said the people of Tveria work all day, and therefore they're automatically considered to be somebody who does not necessarily want the wetness of the dew to be there, even when he goes out to collect it. Okay, that's the second halacha that he said, and the third halacha he says that you're allowed to dry yourself off with a towel after using the bathhouse. This has to be cold water on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. You can dry yourself with a towel. We're not afraid of schita, that you're going to squeeze water out of the towel. He did say, however, you shouldn't bring it home, because on the way home you may squeeze it. You should leave it in the window of the bathhouse. You shouldn't give it to the bathhouse attendant, because they do squeeze it. And Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon said you can bring it home. We're not afraid that you're going to bring it home, that you'll squeeze it on.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.